Attorney Marc Victor here with the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm. And I want to tell you a little bit today about traffic stops, because people ask me all the time, hey Mark, what are my rights when I get pulled over by a police officer on the side of the road? Give me a little rundown. Okay, so this is very brief, very generic, very general type advice, but for starters, don't get pulled over, right? Don't be a free stop for the police officer. And what do I mean by that? If you're exceeding the speed limit, if you've got a tail light out, if you don't come to a complete stop, if you don't have your lights on at night, if you fail to signal when you're changing lanes. There can even be safety violations if you're driving around with a cracked windshield or bald tires or something like that. Police officers can see this as like you have a billboard on your car that says, pull me over, I'm a free stop. What an officer needs to pull you over is either evidence of a traffic stop, and it can be any type of the numerous violations in the traffic code, or reasonable suspicion that a crime was committed and you're the person who's involved in it somehow. They don't need probable cause, they need reasonable suspicion to put those lights on and pull you over, and then you're detained. You are not free to leave. So, first thing you should know, if those lights come on behind you, pull over. Now, if you don't pull over, you run a risk that an officer is going to write you for felony flight. Now, let me just note here, this is sort of a gray area, right? Because you could imagine 2 o'clock in the morning, it's very dark, you don't know if this is a police officer or not, maybe it's an unmarked car with just a blue light. And if you want to drive a little bit to a safer area, maybe something more well lit, I recommend that you don't just do that, but instead you call 911 and you say, hey, I'm in this car and I'm on this road heading in this direction. I'm being pulled over. I want to let you know I am not trying to flee right now. I'm just driving to a safe area. Hopefully it's within a mile or a half a mile. If you go longer than that, a police officer may think that you're committing a felony flight and you could be at risk for that type of a charge. So first off, don't give chase, pull over. Second thing, don't be a threat to the police officer. And I don't care if you like officers or don't like officers or respect them or don't respect them. This is about being smart. Okay, this isn't a good time to be arguing with police officers. Don't be testing your debating skills or showing your knowledge. Your job is to not get shot on the side of the road, right? So keep the hands on the steering wheel. Don't be a threat. Don't just get out of the car. Don't be fumbling around. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. And remember, that officer is likely to ask for driver's license, insurance, and registration, so know where that stuff is. We recommend you keep it in your glove box. We have something at our firm. If you want one, let us know. We'll get one to you where you can put those items, the registration and proof of insurance, in the glove box, and on there is what to say to the police, right? So if they ask you for those docs, you're going to have to provide those docs. Now, if they say step out of the car, this is a place where people get themselves into trouble. What you should know is if the officer is making a valid traffic stop, and we'll decide that later in court, right? This isn't the time to argue with the police officer. They have a right to get you and all of the passengers out of the car. They don't need to tell you why you're pulled over. They don't need to give you any information first. If they say, step out of the car, don't give them a, what did I do wrong? Why do I have to step out of the car? Or anything like that. If they say step out of the car, then step out of the car. I also don't recommend that you volunteer information. You don't have to tell the officer where you're coming from, or where you're going to, or even how much you've had to drink, or any of those types of questions. I also don't recommend that you act like a jerk when you talk to the police officer, right? You should be cool, calm, collected, and non-threatening. If you want to decline to answer a question, do it politely. You can even blame me. You can say, hey, I've got a friend, Marc Victor, and Marc told me to not answer any questions. If Marc says it's okay, I'll answer the question. Can I call Marc right away? You should take the right to remain silent and either not say anything at all, or preferably just give them a very nice answer like that. Sorry, my friend told me not to answer any questions. While I'm on the subject, you don't have to play any games on the side of the road either. Things like walking a straight line and touching your nose and standing on one foot. it's probably best, and you should check the law in your state. But in several states, there's not a sanction for violating that. They might be able to use it against you at your trial. Something like you refuse to take those tests at the scene, isn't that true? But you could say, yes, my attorney told me to never take those tests at the scene, that they're not fair tests or something like that. So probably best to decline those. Now, you're not free to leave. If the lights went on and they told you either stay in your car or get out of the car, you're not free to leave. It's possible that you might have an interaction with a police officer under different circumstances. Imagine you're just sitting in your car and the officer comes and rolls down the window, no blue lights, and says, "Hi, can I ask you a few questions?" Okay, it's not clear if you're free to leave or not. This can be an important point, one you should probably ask a question about. "Excuse me, officer, am I free to leave or am I detained?" I like that question. It makes it very clear. We don't have to argue about later whether this was a voluntary contact with a police officer or an involuntary contact, one that requires reasonable suspicion, which means that the officer can't just say, "Hey, I had some hunch." The officer's got to get on the stand and say, "Look, here are the reasons that I believed. I can articulate specific, objective reasons why I thought this person was involved in criminal activity." Now, it's very important to remember that the officer doesn't have to articulate the reason, nor do they have to have any kind of a major reason to pull you over. It doesn't really matter, and Supreme Court's been very clear over the past couple of decades. We don't want to get in, they say, to what the officer is thinking, right? They might have been thinking, this person, they might look like they're involved in drugs, they're probably leaving a bad neighborhood, I don't really have a good reason to pull them over. They might be thinking something like that. But I'll just follow the person and wait for some traffic violation. Look, they didn't come to a complete stop at the stop sign. I'm going to pull them over for this crazy little reason. That's a valid traffic stop, perfectly valid traffic stop in the United States, because the courts are saying we don't care, with some very thin exceptions, right? If they're pulling you over simply because of your race or ethnic background or something like that, you might have what we call an equal protections argument under a different section. But it's not a Fourth Amendment violation. It's not a violation of your right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. So what I'm saying here is, don't get caught up in what you think the officer is thinking about, because it doesn't matter. The question is, did the officer witness a traffic stop for any particular reason, or does the officer have reasonable suspicion to believe that a crime was committed? This can be simply weaving as they're driving. Maybe they saw you leaving the bar and now they see you're weaving, or countless numbers of, they'll say, indicators of impairment as you're driving down the road. That can certainly be reasonable suspicion. Now, if the officer is going to cite you, they may give you something that says in Arizona, traffic ticket and complaint at the top. Some people don't want to sign these things. I recommend that you do sign it, because all you're saying is, I've been served with it. If you don't want to sign that, usually you're going to buy yourself an arrest with a ticket to the station and probably a night in jail overnight. Remember, officers have a lot of discretion on the side of the road. They can choose to cite you. They can give you a free pass. They could give you a warning and say, "Hey, slow it down," or something like that. It always pays, I think, to be friendly to the officer. They also have a lot of discretion to arrest you and haul you to the police station and to book you into jail, or to cite and release you and not arrest you. So there are many different things an officer can do on the side of the road. This is the worst place ever to get into a debate over the Fourth Amendment, or whether they had probable cause or reasonable suspicion, or whether it's a valid arrest, or whether the law was violated. Terrible time to do that. Just comply. Your job is to make sure you don't get shot, and to comply, and don't let the thing escalate. Remember, there are different types of police officers, just like there are different types of citizens. There are good ones, there are bad ones, and you should be sort of assessing the police officer. If you don't know the police officer, you should maybe assume that this could be somebody who could be easily agitated, and you don't want to be the source of getting somebody upset. So whether you actually respect police or not, fine, you have a right. You don't have to respect police in a free country, or even in the United States for that matter, to the extent we're not a free country, or we are a free country. We're like every other country. We're a mixed bag of certain freedoms and certain lack of freedoms. So in any event, you don't have to like police officers. You don't have to respect police officers, but pretend you do for the purpose of the traffic stop, right? Your job is to survive that traffic stop with as little aggravation as possible. You're not likely to make a new friend. This isn't a time to be chit-chatty. Get the stop over and get out of there. If you want to complain about the officer, do that later. If you got a legal issue, you come see a lawyer, we'll deal with it in court. The side of the road is the wrong place to be getting into an argument with police officers. So anyways, just a quick rundown. What you got to do, you got to pull over. You got to provide proof of insurance, license, registration. They ask you to get out of the vehicle, you got to get out of the vehicle. Different states have different rules about firearms. Here in Arizona, if the officer says, "Do you have a gun in the car?" you have to answer that question truthfully. If you lie about it, you're committing a crime. If the officer says, "Look, I'm going to take that weapon for my safety," you have to allow the officer to take that weapon. Be very careful around weapons. You don't want to be grabbing for a weapon. Let the officer take the weapon in the car. And then you're detained. You're not free to leave. If you're not clear about this because of the circumstances, an officer just approached you and started talking to you, for example, you might want to clarify that. "Hey, officer, am I free to leave or not?" So there's a few basic overview rules on traffic stops on the side of the road. I think you should go into it with a good attitude. It's been my experience over 27 years of practice. Most police officers are just fine. There definitely are some bad apples in there, and you don't know who you're dealing with. So play it safe and don't be sorry. Whatever you do, don't let the situation get escalated on the side of the road. Keep it cool, calm, and collected. Again, my name is Marc J. Victor. I'm one of the attorneys at the Attorneys for Freedom law firm. We're a group of activist attorneys. We are pro-freedom at our law firm. If you have questions for me or you want to reach out, you have something you want to say, good or bad, happy to hear you. If you agree or disagree, you can email me directly. It's just Marc, M-A-R-C, at Attorneys for Freedom, all spelled out, attorneys, F-O-R, freedom.com. Thanks for listening.